Hey everybody, this is Perch, and I'm here with Joe. How are you doing?
I'm all right, Perch. How are you?
Oh, I'm great. I'm looking at a stack of brand new number one issues, and I'm thinking to myself, who cares? How about you?
Usually the same. I think we do. Whenever you do your live stream, there's always a minimum of 15 new number ones on average a week, if not more.
Yeah, at least, yeah. I mean, it usually breaks down to about 20, 25% of all the comics tend to be number one issues, and on one hand, you think to yourself, well, I bet a bunch of these are kind of the small independent companies that are doing things. And there are some, but more often than not, they're from the big companies. And I guess my question to you is, does the number one matter anymore?
I feel like it may be used to. This is one of those instances where we're still suffering from the '90s
Hmm.
of people forget that there was a time where no one wanted a number one.
Right.
The publishers were convinced you do everything you can to not have a number one. That's why when the Flash went from the Golden Age to the Silver Age, it went from issue 104, and then when they started up, it was issue 105.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, there was no Thor number one in the first volume of the book. There wasn't a Thor number one until what, 98 with Jurgens?
Yep.
Yeah, stuff like that. You avoided a number one by any means necessary. There was no Captain America number one in the Silver Age. There was no Iron Man. I think they just
It just
split
split the
off
branch.
from
Yeah.
they split off from the other books.
I mean, many books went 30 years or more without relaunching. And like you say, I mean, we've been doing some of these interviews, and this common line we hear is, a number one was seen as it was a detraction. It was a place. It was an opportunity for people to stop collecting. It was something you, like you said, you avoided at any
Yeah.
cost. But today, by contrast, also on those Friday streams, we start looking at the highest numbered books, and you're rarely into triple digits.
Oh yeah.
You're rarely over, say, 30. It's
Yeah.
What is this doing to people? So does it even matter anymore? I guess is the point. Does the numbering? Is anybody paying attention to numbering at all?
Yeah, I don't know because what year was it? There was a few years ago where we had two Miss Marvel number ones in the same year.
Yeah, 2017, I think.
Yeah,
And Captain Marvel did the same thing as well.
yeah, but the idea is that we hear at least is, oh, it's a new jumping on point. It's we're trying to make it as easy as possible for the readers. I don't see how it's easy for a reader to have two number ones of the same book in the same year.
Yeah, I agree. It feels like that's assuming that your audience's attention span has basically no longevity at all. That you're basically getting them for a couple months and then they're gone. Uh,
Yeah, and I don't know. It seems like, and this is a common problem in comics. It's a common problem in life, but it's the oh, it's like the over analyzing everything to the point where you're trying to make things easier, and you do it until it is far more confusing than it ever was.
Yeah, I mean, I've wondered myself, like, and we kind of seemed like we kind of hit this point a couple of years ago. Like, what is the numbering? I mean, they could switch to letters for all we care. It's not going to
Yeah.
matter anymore. Is it just like we want to start calling these comics season one, season two, and it becomes we just change the numbering up based on some arbitrary amount of books that are going to come out in a year, and then we're going to reset next year? I mean, is that where this is all heading? Where it's just kind of goo?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of already is. I mean, doing legacy numbering, doing
Sure.
point ones, like all these things that they've done, which is pure madness and steeped in stupidity. And I understand where someone could come up with this rationale. At the same time, there's nothing easier for someone to follow than what's the next issue? The one number higher.
Yeah, chronological.
Like, what's the issue before this? The number before that. Like,
do you think I've heard it speculated before that the publishers do not care about the aftermarket? That basically they care about getting their initial money, and once they've got it, they could really care less.
Yeah,
and I've always thought that can't be completely true, because you do have a trade market. You do sell on that bank that you built up. That you put out these comics, and you're going to have more of them. So this history matters for the brand, and it's valuable. But decisions like this, it does start to make you feel that way when we're publishing out like Amazing Spider-Man number 42.LR, and we're mixing up just letters and numbers, and then we're going to reboot this and have this stuff over here. I mean, I don't know how anyone, even 3 months after this stuff comes out, understands what is going on, what order to read things in at all. Like,
yeah, they end up waiting. You're forcing people to wait for the trade because that's the only way they think they can read it in order.
Yeah. But then why? But then why not just either just put out trades?
Sure.
At that point, or the trades when they do come out often skip these issues or do not include them for weird reasons. Or I've noticed Spider-Man did this where they had a trade for the core series and then a second trade with the tie-ins to that core series, but they were two separate books. And like, what are you supposed to like read it a few pages through one book and then put that trade down and go to the next one? I mean, it just like King in Black is going to do this, where you've got these things all split up all over the place. This is just really weird. I don't know how anyone figures this out.
Yeah, no, it's incredibly weird. And then, speaking of the aftermarket, again, the number one isn't getting people to read it, and a non-number one doesn't push people away. And some of these examples, and we've talked about them before, is no one's picked up the omnibus or the first trade of Frank Miller's Daredevil and looked at it and said, starts with 158, no can do, buddy.
Yeah,
I need number one. Like, that's not, people don't function that way. And everyone knows that and openly talks about, oh no, people don't just start from the golden and silver ages and read forward. You just have to find a starting point. So it's like, oh, okay, so they don't do that. We're all talking about how that's not a thing. But at the same time, being like, oh, well, can't they start at like a non-number one? Oh, I don't know. It's not that inviting. I mean, Grant Morrison's New X-Men started at 114, and no one, and that's again modern age kind of stuff. I've never met someone who's picked up the omnibus or the first trade of that and went, I got to read 100 through 113 before I tackle this. That's not a thing.
It just, I don't, like you said, I don't understand what people are trying to do here. When Hush came out, that didn't start from a number one. Nobody had any trouble figuring that one out.
Yeah.
Hush started with issue 608.
Yeah.
And the sales more than doubled. Mm-hmm. And I was looking recently through some comics in the 80s and the 90s, and they would on the cover put the start of a brand new story or a old new jumping on point. I mean, they would tell you in text on the book. They would not mess with the number, but they would just tell you this. And that seemed to work for people because as you correspondingly look at sales numbers, you see that the sales jump. People figure it out that's the start of a new storyline. It's not that complicated. And in that case, we were looking at the newsstand, and so there was no comic retailer to kind of come hover by and go, oh, this is where you want to go. This is the first issue of the series. People just figured it out because they weren't idiots.
Yeah.
I don't think people are idiots today. But, well, maybe that's a bold statement, but I think people could figure this one out. I don't know. Like you said, I think it's way more confusing to have two number one Captain Marvel or Miss Marvel comics coming out in the same year. That seems more confusing.
Yeah, and again, the rapid volumes of things. Like there's so many books where it's like, oh, there's only one volume between, the early 1960s and the 90s, and then you jump ahead, and now Avengers was like one volume for over 30 years, and now we've got to be on what, volume 7 or something like that of Avengers, like.
When I did those videos of the reboots, to my horror, we passed 10 with the Jason Aaron run.
Oh my God!
So,
but yeah, so that means that what? So going from 1 to 2 was about 35 years.
Yep.
And in the preceding 30, or not even
less,
23 years or
in 23 years we had 9 relaunches, and that's not counting things like Dark Avengers and all the various spin-offs. So
so again, in 35 years there was one volume of Avengers, and in 23 there's been 9 more.
Yeah, that's really weird.
Yes.
And on top of that, like, if somebody's going to have a problem figuring this stuff out, wouldn't it have been the people in the 70s and the 80s where there was no internet, there was no easy way to look this stuff up, you'd have to go to a comic buyer's guide to kind of track what's going on, but somehow that group figured it out. And today, with all the information tools we have under our hands, we don't think people can mentally get past 12 issues?
Yeah, with all the tools, not only the internet, ordering online, having descriptions for everything easily found, being able to Google through and look through like Previews World, being able to go to shops and have people hold your hand through the whole scenario, all stuff that did not exist in the 70s. It's fine. There's, and now it's even far more confusing than ever. I'm glad the 0.1s and all that have died down, because that was a nightmare. But
I mean, you say that, but there's a pretty decent amount of them coming in July. Again, Spider-Man's leveraging it heavily. It looks like the Avengers are using it.
But and correct me if I'm wrong here, but a number makes it sound like that's a full issue. When you tell me this comic is a 10th of a number, you're telling me this is a 10th of the importance.
And it absolutely feels that way. And it never, every time they do this, and just my own personal opinion, but also customers coming into the store, I remember people picking up, like a 0.1. Bendis was doing this during the Age of Ultron event. There were some AU books and 0.1 books, and it's like, well, this is skippable. And one of the books wasn't. One of the 0.1s had some kind of reveal in it that was going to matter. And I remember telling people, no, this one's going to matter. It's like, well, if it mattered, why didn't they just have it in the normal series? What's the 0.1 thing? That's how normal human brains work.
Yeah.
This is abnormal. This isn't, I mean, Walking Dead went from 2003 to 2019. 193 issues. Did not relaunch. Sales continuously climbed. There wasn't a point like around issue 60 where they're like, crap, we got to reboot this thing. It's getting too high. People are not going to understand that they're dealing with the governor now, and so we have to update this. This feels like a self-inflicted problem.
Oh, it absolutely is. Same thing with Invincible. Same thing with Spawn. Spawn's over 300 issues, and it turns out if you just put a little more into the marketing and really make it feel special, more people buy it. Yeah,
it's like they advertise and they get a positive result.
It's pretty crazy. What a bold move!
I've never seen such a thing. It is very, very strange, and I wonder, because in the last 2 years or so, we're seeing more events, which means more one-offs, and we're seeing more limited series, which and tie-ins and everything else. how hard is it going to be, do you think, 15, 20 years from now, to be able to read and understand what is going on for somebody?
I think it's already very hard. I can't be bothered with so much of what comes out. Like, yeah, you can't have so many crossovers, because now they're the new thing, not the new thing, but the past few years, what they started doing is like, oh, so what we're going to do is, instead of interrupting some storylines, we'll still kind of interrupt them in these other books, but we're going to have a special one-shot crossover with the character, with a different writer and artist, like these King in Black one-shots, and we'll get the sales boost of a number one. But now they've overused the number one so much, I think it's all diminishing, because number ones are not new reader friendly at all.
No, they're not. They're not. And you're seeing them have to imply more variant covers to get the numbers for the number ones up. Yeah. And I mean, at this point, it's just an entire game for the collector market. But the collectors aren't even collecting number ones anymore. They're collecting variant covers of those number ones because they want a particular artist. But all this feels incredibly destructive to anyone with a basic MBA.
Oh, for sure. But like, for example, a number one I think we both read from last week was X Corp.
Yep.
And not to pick on X Corp and single it out, because there are plenty of other examples from last week. There is nothing about that book that's new reader friendly.
No.
If you were not reading X titles before, and you were like, oh, finally, a number one, I can jump in, you're not sticking around. You're done. You are gone. You are running for the hills reading something like that, because it is just steeped in deep continuity.
Sure. I mean, putting aside other factors, just the number one aspect. Yeah, I mean, you're dropped into a story with a bunch of characterization. You're even borrowing some things from Peter David's run from a long time ago. Yeah. You're trying to figure out why these X-Men characters are flying around on a floating island. I mean, like that would be. I would love to actually meet and interview somebody who decided this is the first X-Men book I'm going to read. I've been hearing about it. I'm starting here. Mm-hmm. That would be a hilarious experience, I think.
Yeah, and like the more you think about this, like how many number ones come out that if someone went into a store and was like, oh, this is a number one, I haven't read this before, is this a good point to jump in? And nearly every time a person at a store would be like, no. Yeah. Don't start here. It's like, but it's what? It's a number one issue. Shouldn't this be? No, you can't. Why? Because way too much continuity. Like what?
Yeah, I mean it's a various thing. I mean, if you're talking about X Corp, you could have taken that storyline, you could have folded it into one of the existing books, and probably done better, at least from a perception standpoint, about what it is you're doing. Again, forgetting the quality of the book for a moment, but it just the I mean, but this is true of a lot of stuff. I think X Factor number one, you're dropped into a very dense story around resurrection protocols. That's not going to be friendly to anybody.
Sure, and then jumping right into like Mojoverse stuff shortly after that, like it's a lot. And then with this latest event where they're going to have a party for 12 issues, mm-hmm. They're doing another gimmick where it's, the red issues are the ones you need to read.
Yeah.
And again, this is just like the point ones, where you have a publisher who's telling you, we're putting out so much stuff that a lot of it you don't actually have to read. Mm-hmm. That's not good.
I had the same reaction when I saw this, and it's like, hey, we've got 4 red issues, and as you all know, those are the issues that matter. I'm like, what a what a really weird way to describe your 12 issue event. Those are the ones that matter. Like, that's not how you should talk about this.
No, it's I don't understand. What are they doing?
The House of X Powers of 10 line, when they did that, they stopped all the books. They put out these two. Yes, definitely they were number ones, but it did feel like at least, it was a start of something. It'd still be very confusing, I think, if you came in there and said, this is my first ever X-Men book.
Yeah.
You'd be in trouble. But still, it did feel like the start of something big. So I think it earned that. And then they used the red issue there as well, but it was a red issue within a 6 issue. Each one was 6 issues each, 12 issues total. Mm-hmm. And they're like, these are some major moments during this limited series, but they weren't sending this kind of counter message that if you just buy these 4 issues, you'll be fine. It was this, you need to buy the whole thing, and here's some huge moments that are going to be revealed to you during this series. So it seemed like they did that, and then they took a baffling lesson from that experience and decided to do. I mean, the Hellfire Gala is also 12 issues. Is it going to have the same impact as House of X Powers of 10? Do you think?
We can't know for certain, but it seems unlikely.
It seems, yeah.
And again, I understand it with Hoxpox to a point, but also it was completely unnecessary. Right. People were hooked out the gate. You didn't need anything like that to be like, oh, and you should especially read this one.
And they didn't actually, if I remember this correctly, it wasn't until the series was almost over that they basically, because in the little listing for the comics, some of the comics were read, but they didn't tell you why.
Yeah.
And very late in the series, they're like, well, those were the major moments. They kind of almost let people figure that out for themselves, which is a cool kind of thing that people could do.
Yeah.
We didn't lead with saying, Hickman's coming onto this. We've got a brand new number one. Make sure you jump in. And 4 of these issues are going to be important. They never sold it that way.
Yeah.
Because that would have been stupid.
Yes.
But you mentioned Grant Morrison earlier, and you could have also rolled out the Hoxpox just in Uncanny X-Men as well. I mean, there was a time when that would have been fine. I mean,
again, just going back to all that. No one puts back the Dark Phoenix Saga trade because they're like, this is starting at like issue 128 or 129 in this trade. I can't read that. That's too far into it. I can't read Days of Futures Past. These 2 issues. It's too deep into the series.
I mean, we got the news. I completely. We got the news that Immortal Hulk is ending, issue 50, which we knew, but now it's doubly confirmed. I don't know. Some sites were running that they confirmed it today, but we already knew this. So it ends with issue 50. They said that for a while we're just going to get a bunch of number one shots in this Immortal Hulk universe, and then ultimately we'll get some kind of relaunch. So. Again, the wisdom of this, Immortal Hulk was a very different take on the Hulk. Do you think that warranted a number one, or could you have just, once again, just rolled it out and called it a day and had it be part of the ongoing series?
Yeah, absolutely. No one refuses to pick up Peter David's Hulk because it starts around 330.
Yeah.
No one looks at what issues are in collections of Planet Hulk and World War Hulk and go, well, it's not Hulk number 1, so shit out of luck, I guess.
You said it earlier, but this is a statement I hear from people inside the companies. Exactly what you just said, that nobody picks up Daredevil by Frank Miller and goes, well, it's not number 1, I can't clear. So if the company themselves says this, I think I've seen Tom Brevoort's blogs has made this comment as well. He's made this observation. If they're saying this inside the company, then why? Who's doing this?
It's baffling. I mean, you pick up collections now of these events, like you pick up an omnibus for something like Absolute Carnage or some of the Annihilation stuff, and it's like half the books in it are number 1s.
Yeah,
it's like. This shouldn't be. It's not helpful. It's clearly harmful. And then we see a problem that's common with all of this, and it's constantly trying to figure out ways to accommodate the problem rather than do something different.
Yeah. Do you think, so what, fast forward a little bit. Number one, can this be fixed? Like, how do you fix this? What do you do?
I think part of fixing it is stopping it. Just stop doing it. Like,
stop relaunching, go with the numbers you have, and shut up.
I think you can just do that because, like, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I'm sure you could find them pretty quick. The difference between sales of Action Comics and Superman, for example, like when Bendis, same writer, you can't even be like, oh, it's a different vision. They tie together.
Yeah.
Action Comics, I don't think was selling that much less than Superman.
No, in some cases higher.
Yeah, so same thing when you do Detective Comics and Batman.
Yeah, it's really all about the creator. You get a hotter artist, and Detective Comics start selling more.
Yeah, so the number's not the issue.
So just do it, as you're saying, and then the other piece is there will come a day. I know some people are dreading where there will be a digital app. There will be a Marvel's version of the Shonen Jump app. This kind of subscribe, this all you can eat. They have Marvel Unlimited, but more so. The prices will come down. There will be more content there. It will be a true place where all the material is stored. How shitty of a job is it going to be for the person to try and organize this out in the app in a logical reading order? Or do you think they're even going to try?
I don't know if they can even do it. Like, they've made it so difficult for themselves. They made it difficult for the readers. It's difficult for me. I don't read a lot of these things sometimes because of that reason, where, if you put out 2 number ones in the same year or close to the same year, and I'm like, this is a number one that says 1 year, and this is a number one that's only the year after, and sometimes it's the same team on the book, and you're just like, no, this is... Stop! It doesn't make any sense. It's highly illogical, but everyone convinces themselves that it's working. It's not working. The sales reflect it doesn't work. Customer feedback reflects it doesn't work. If anything, there's just confusion. You hear all the time people being like, I think I bought the same issue twice, because between variant covers and point ones and numbers and people buy multiple copies of the same issue. Like, you hear that more than anything.
Don't you think it would be relatively simple for the groups to just keep the numbering intact, so it's easier on themselves for collections, it's easier on readers and everything else? And then every 6 issues, 12 issues, whatever it happens to be, you're going to launch into a big, bold new storyline. It's your bold new direction. Maybe it's a new creative team, maybe it's not. And you just promote issue 682 of a bold new direction in the Avengers. And you publish 30 variant covers. I mean, I hate that, but you could do that. You put 30 variant covers on number 682 because it's the first start of a brand new arc where Kang's going to do some bad shit again. And you'd get the same benefit of the sales bump from the variants and the kickoff to the new storyline, and you don't wreck your numbering. It feels like that would be a good thing.
Yeah, it turns out if you just put creators on books that people really like, the numbers just go up. Like when you have, Jim Lee do 12 consecutive issues of Batman, the numbers skyrocket, as opposed to, they didn't need... The numbers for Hush would not have gone up if it was a number one. And some might even argue they might not have gone as high.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's true, actually.
Yeah. Like, being part of the main Bat title, I think, helped that book.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's hard to say, it's hard to say because we don't have the comparison. But what we do know definitively is that for about 2 to 3 years after Hush, it maintained a higher average than it had going into it. Yeah. And in many cases with lesser known creators for a period of time, it gathered an audience, and then it prolonged that audience. Where if they would have immediately, got done with Hush and then rebooted it again, they would have had to start all over. It's very peculiar.
But yeah, you have that. Creators are a big part of this. I think we're entering a point where people really like art to be consistent and for artists to stay on books, and rather than keep artists consistent on books, it feels like companies are going out of their way and bending over backwards to be like, okay, look, we refuse to give you the same artists on the books. So what if we start at number one again?
Mm-hmm.
What if we relaunch and give you a bunch of variant covers? Like, what can we do that's not just getting an artist to commit to, God forbid, 12 issues in a row of a comic?
You've edited comics, of course, many comics. Obviously, we've heard, especially with some of the more superstar artists that may have some other commitments and things, it's tough to do 12 issues in a year.
It sure is.
Couldn't you? Now this is a crazy idea, but what if you planned ahead, and then you basically gave that artist a pretty healthy lead time, and then simultaneously got another artist with a lead time? Couldn't you stagger this out in such a way that you could get 12 issues out of somebody, even if it took longer, because you're doubling up on comics? Like, is it possible to coordinate such a thing?
Yeah, it's weird how not only is it possible, but we've seen how that pays off with things like Hush.
Don't you think that if they gave artists 12-issue runs, longer runs, that those artists would develop more of a fan following, and the artists would be grateful for having a longer string of committed work, and that might actually benefit their own line? I mean, sure, they'd lose a couple people in this process, but more often than not, don't you think it would help the artist or the writer, the creative team, be more encouraged to re-sign with the company and do more if they felt like they were being treated well and had some future commitment?
It's a shame how hypothetical that has become in the past several years, but we've seen that all the time. We've seen a lot of artists, like Greg Capullo, for example, on Batman. That run with Scott Snyder sold very well, and there were very few issues Greg didn't do.
Yeah.
And part of that selling, I think, you did the analysis, they kept it over 100,000 for...
Yeah, they did. It consistently did very well, and in that case, they never dropped below 100,000 per run. And even when you did have fill-in artists, and there were some, they did this weird thing where Snyder wrote an arc, and then they kept Capullo on for the whole arc, and then they did this very unusual thing where they did a story break, like a done in one issue with the fill-in artist, and then when they went into the next arc, Capullo came back, and it was this crazy idea, but it seemed to pay off.
Yeah, and we have all the evidence, and you don't have to just save it for Batman. It's possible you could do something like this with like The Flash or Wonder Woman and get those numbers up.
Yeah. We've kind of gone astray to another topic, but wouldn't it be wise, if you know that Batman is on solid footing and sells well, that you say figure out a maybe a lesser known artist than Greg Capullo, who's super popular, and Snyder, who wrote a good story there. And what if you then took Snyder and Capullo and got them to commit to, say, 2 years on Wonder Woman to bring the sales up, and you put kind of the next up-and-coming person on Batman, since those sales already are up? Wouldn't that have a net raising everything effect?
Yeah, but instead of doing that, what if you restarted Batman to tell all the people that like that it's okay to stop buying Batman now, it's a new guy, and went that way, so that way you can lose all of the momentum you built up for Batman while also shedding thousands, possibly tens of thousands of readers.
Yeah, that sounds genius. Yeah. Well, okay, but like you said, all this data is out there. Everybody has it. It's consistent. The weird thing is we're not cherry pick. This is not hundreds of hours of analysis. This stuff is kind of right in your face. Lots of people are seeing this, including, again, people inside the company. So is it kind of just like a heroin thing? People are chasing the dragon for that number one issue, just convinced that they've got to catch it. And it does not, none of it makes sense. None of it adds up. But that's what you're supposed to do. So I guess we'll keep doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is people aren't chasing those number one issues.
And customers certainly aren't.
Customers aren't. Stores really aren't. Stores begrudgingly buy these books because there's this idea of like, might as well, you can try it out. It's a number one.
You get the variants.
And then you get a lot of customers that begrudgingly go like, I guess I'll give it a shot. It's a number one, maybe. And that's why the numbers drop significantly from number one to number two.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's mostly people begrudgingly checking it out or very passively checking it out.
Well, people have asked this question. I've tried to explain it the other direction, but when you're a shop, you can confirm this, so they don't have to just trust me. When you're a shop and you're ordering issue number 2, issue number 1 hasn't hit your store yet.
Yeah.
So you're a store owner. You don't know how well this is going to sell. But despite that, almost every number 1 relaunch that I've covered over the last 5 years or so has a 50% or higher drop from issue number 1 to issue number 2.
Mm-hmm.
So this just tells me that the retailers are already very aware that their audience is going to plummet before they've even seen a single sale.
Yeah.
And so they're already writing off half of the customers.
Yeah.
It seems like if you're a publisher, you would want to find a way to have that not happen.
Yeah, and some smaller publishers have looked into that. Scout Comics is now doing a staggered release where there's more time between the first issue and the second issue. So that way stores are able to adjust their orders for final order cutoff before the issue 2 cutoff.
Yeah. Well, maybe that'll help.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's baffling. Joe, we've collected comics for a long time. I mean, we know all this stuff. I have to imagine if you're relatively new to comics, you're standing there in your bookstore or you're on Amazon. And by the way, we didn't even cover this. If you go to Amazon, this online store where you have no threading at all, like it is next to impossible to figure out a buying order for a lot of this stuff on Amazon.
Yeah, there are YouTubers who their thing is explaining buying orders, like Uncanny Omar on Near Mint Condition, and that is not it's a great channel. This is not a knock on him at all, but he shouldn't have to do that. The publishers should make it easy for you to purchase their product. You should not need YouTubers to tell you what order to read things in. That should be the publisher.
Agreed. Omar is a great guy. I love his channel.
Yes.
He has a great channel that should be absolutely unnecessary.
Yes.
That makes sense. It's like good for him that he is doing that, but what a pathetic fact that he has to do this at all.
Yes, absolutely.
And I suspect he would agree. I should reach out to him and get his take on it. But
it would be great.
Is he happy? I wonder, like doing this. Like he's doing this service, but I do wonder if he's like, does some part of him every now and then just go, "Fuck, why am I doing this?"
No, I mean, I think he's happy that he's getting these books sold because you've also seen, I think, between his channel growing a lot the past year and no cons and people having more disposable income. Yeah. Potentially, that we've seen a lot of omnibuses and things like that sell out, and I think that's in no short order from his channel, and to the point where like Marvel should be like cutting him a check because he's moving a lot of their product.
I hope somebody's reaching out and giving him some love somewhere.
For sure.
They better. Yeah, Joe, thank you very much, and we'll struggle through this together.
Thank you.